7 o'clock. We're just a little
Good
over
evening,
18
ladies and gentlemen. It is 6:30, and I will call this regular meeting of the Burnsville City Council to order. It is our tradition to stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, and we invite you to join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have announcements, and we have 3 proclamations this evening. Our announcements have to do with all of our upcoming meetings. Regular council meetings are scheduled for Tuesday, May 2nd and Tuesday, May 16th at 6:30 p.m. We have a work session scheduled for Tuesday, May 9th at 6:30 p.m. and a special work session scheduled for Tuesday, April 25th at 4:30 p.m. And that meeting will be held in Conference Room D, and this is for the city manager's performance review. All other meetings are held here in the council chambers. And I will be reading 3 proclamations, and I'll do that from that side. Members of the council and citizens of Burnsville and guests, this is Arbor's Day. Arbor's month. And so we have an Earth Day and Arbor Day, April 29th proclamation. Whereas Burnsville has taken great pride in the quality of our natural environment, including the beautiful shade trees and native plants that provide many essential services to the community and enrich our lives in many ways. Whereas we need to practice safe environmental approaches in managing our forest, lakes, wetlands, and open spaces. And whereas Burnsville promotes development that maintains or enhances economic opportunity and community well-being while protecting and restoring the natural environment. And whereas the purpose of Earth Day, Arbor Day celebration is to emphasize the importance of preserving our natural environment through sustainable activities such as recycling, waste reduction, and resource conservation. And whereas Burnsville recognizes the need to protect and preserve the beauty of our community by promoting good stewardship of our natural environment for future generations. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Elizabeth Couts, Mayor of the City of Burnsville, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim April 29, 2017 as Earth Day and Arbor Day in the City of Burnsville. In celebration of Earth Day and Arbor Day, there will be a school recycling presentation, which will include handing out tree seedlings to students, a community tree sale, which will be held on Saturday, April 29th, 2017, from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m., and a native plant market, which will be held on Saturday, May 20th, from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Information on sustainability, composting, and water quality will be available at the sales. We encourage the entire community to participate in the tree sale and the native plant market, proclaimed this 18th day of April 2017. And we also have Tourism Awareness Week. Whereas travel is among the largest private sector employer in the United States, supporting 15.3 million jobs, including 8.6 million directly in the travel industry and 6.7 million in other industries. And whereas tourism in Minnesota is a $14.4 billion industry, employing more than 254,000 people with state and local tax revenue of $930 million. And whereas tourism and hospitality in Burnsville continues to play a vital role in the economic well-being of our community, and tourism and hospitality in Burnsville provide full-time and part-time employment for the citizens of our city. And whereas the Burnsville Convention and Visitors Bureau has dedicated itself for 30 years to stimulating visitor traffic to the Burnsville area, creating income for both the hospitality industry and the general business community. And whereas the city of Burnsville takes great pride in the hospitality it shows its guests. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Elizabeth Couts, Mayor of the City of Burnsville, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim the week of May 7th through the 13th, 2017, to be National Travel and Tourism Week in the City of Burnsville, and urge citizens to honor and celebrate this special event. Proclaim this 18th day of April 2017. And we have with us Ms. Amy Burrell, who is the Executive Director of our Convention and Visitors Bureau, Experience Burnsville. Amy.
Thank you so much, Mayor.
And thank you for all the work that you do for our city. So we'll. Okay. Would the council please come and get your pictures taken also? You're here because you're tiny. We'll let those
You will
big
be
guys,
taken.
stand in the back.
Stand here so you can be as tall as you go.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And then we have one more proclamation. The next one, and this is one that I'm also very proud of because the city of Burnsville is recognizing and becoming a Parkinson's awareness city in partnership with the Lions Club and also Prince of Peace and Nicollet Foundation. Nicollet, is it Nicollet Foundation? Park Nicollet Foundation, yes. So Parkinson's Awareness Month. Whereas Parkinson's disease is a chronic progressive neurological disease and is the second most common neurodegenerative disease in the United States. And whereas there is inadequate data on the incidence and prevalence of Parkinson's disease, but it is estimated to affect approximately 1 million people in the United States, and the prevalence will more than double by 2040. And Parkinson's disease is the 14th leading cause of death in the United States, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And whereas the economic burden of Parkinson's disease is about $14.4 billion annually, including indirect costs to patients and family members of $6.3 billion. And whereas the cause of Parkinson's disease is from genetic and environmental factors, but the exact cause and progression of the disease is still unknown. And whereas there is no objective test or biomarkers for Parkinson's disease, and there is no cure or drug to slow or halt the progression of the disease, and whereas the symptoms of Parkinson's disease vary and include tremors, slowness of movement and rigidity, difficulty with balance, swallowing, chewing, and speaking, cognitive impairment, and dementia, mood disorder, and other non-motor symptoms. And volunteers, researchers, caregivers, and medical professionals work to improve the quality of life for persons with Parkinson's disease and their families. And whereas increased research, education, and community support services are needed to find more effective treatment and to provide access to quality care to those living with the disease today. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Elizabeth Couts, Mayor of the City of Burnsville, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim April 2017 as Parkinson's Awareness Month in the City of Burnsville and urge all citizens to recognize and participate in its observance, proclaimed this 18th day of April. And here to accept the proclamation is Lion President Steve Knudsen. Please come up. And council members, do we have somebody have a, do you have your camera? You didn't bring your camera? Oh, okay, come on. We have a camera here, and then we'll send it to the rooms. Okay, thank you. And then you can send it to the Lions.
Yes, I will.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
thank you. The next item on our agenda is citizens' comments. This is the opportunity for anyone in the audience to address the council on an item that is not on the printed agenda and not an application form that will be coming before us at a future date. Is there anyone who wishes to address the council? Anyone who wishes to address the council? Seeing no one, we will move on. The next item is additions to the final agenda, and this is for emergency items only. Ms. Johnston, are there any emergency items to come before the council?
None from staff, Madam Mayor.
Okay, members of the council? Okay, thank you. We will then move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda is a group of items that's considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. However, an item on a consent agenda can be removed for a separate discussion and vote. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes an item on the consent agenda to be removed for a separate discussion and vote? Anyone who wishes an item to be removed for a separate discussion? Seeing no one. Ms. Johnston?
None from staff, Madam Mayor.
Members of the council? May I have a motion, please?
Move to approve. Second.
Councilmember Gustafson makes the motion, second by Councilmember Keeley. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. And the motion carries. Thank you. The first item on the regular agenda is a continued item from March 21st, 2017. And this is the application for Mr. and Mrs. Chris Burdick for a variance from the Shoreland Environmental Overlay District water quality standards requiring a vegetated buffer strip on the riparian lot as a mitigation measure for a variance at 735 Crystal Lake Road East. And this is to deny the variance as submitted and approve a modified buffer yard plan to variance previously granted and adopt the findings of fact. Mr. Albrecht, you're presenting this evening.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I will be real brief. I just want to give you
Yep.
an overview of what the proposed buffer is. The Burdicks have been working very diligently with staff and turned around a plan very quickly to meet the city's ordinance, so we're very appreciative of them taking that on. And so what you have before you tonight is, as you noted, we'll actually be denying the variance request because they are able to modify their existing buffer plan to meet the city's ordinance. And the city's ordinance allows flexibility both in the average width of the buffer and the makeup of the buffer. It doesn't necessarily have to be as it was proposed in the original application. It can have native plants within the buffer, and it can be different materials as long as that material is not a mowed material. So drawing the council's attention to the picture that's been modified. This area that's kind of in a pinkish color, they have an existing buffer that ranges anywhere from 6 to 9 feet already installed along the lake. It isn't planted yet, so part of this plan would be to add some native plantings within that existing buffer. And then also on both sides of the lot to add in additional width of buffer on the side lot areas, these yellow areas, which would help meet the average buffer width requirement as the ordinance requires. And then those areas will be planted also. The two conditions that we've worked on with the Burdicks are that they'll submit a plant list to city staff by June 1st, and then they'll complete the work by September, the planting. As I mentioned, the existing buffer area is already installed. It just needs some plants put in it to meet the code and the ordinance. And so with that, I spoke to the Burdicks beforehand. They didn't have any comments, but they are here if you have any questions of them, and I would stand for any questions. Again, procedurally, what we need to do tonight is deny the original variance application request and approve the modification of the buffer yard plan to the original buffer yard plan. And with that, I'd stand for any questions.
I don't have any questions for you, but I do want to thank staff and the Burdicks. I know that if we could all get together and really understand what your desires are and what the ordinance is, we could arrive at a plan that would meet everybody's needs. And that's what we have before us this evening. And it looks like it's going to look very nice. And it will maintain the integrity of your beautiful yard, backyard, and also have the buffer zone that will help to filter some of that drainage. And the other thing that I heard the other night is that you're using the lake to irrigate. So you're irrigating from the lake and going back into the lake. And so I looked at the plant list, and it's going to also give you some wonderful color. So whichever you choose, you're going to have some beautiful color in those two areas. So thank you to staff, thank you to the DNR, thank you to Mr. and Mrs. Burdick and your patience and diligence with the work that we have to do in helping to keep our lake and our environment pristine, and also continuing to make it good for those in the future. So I want to thank everybody. The one thing that I wanted to make sure that we have in place, as I looked at the findings of fact, and I believe that that's going to happen, is that the DNR did approve the riprap, the rock retaining wall, but it wasn't reflected in the findings of fact. But I think we have a way of putting that in there.
We have a letter of record from the DNR to that effect, so we have an official correspondence from them.
Yeah.
So it's not necessary to have that in our findings of fact, per se.
Yeah, I think we're going to do that. Okay. Any other questions? If not, do the Burdicks have any comments? Okay, we'll move on. Any comments? Yes, Councilmember Coughlin.
No comment.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
ready to make a motion.
Then let's go.
Motion to adopt the draft findings and decision denying the variance application for an exemption for the buffer yard requirement, and to approve a modification to the 2015 buffer yard plan as shown in the revised buffer plan, subject to the conditions, dates, and approvals specified in the staff report, including the requirement for any required DNR permit.
Okay.
And I'll second.
And there's a second by Councilmember Schultz. Mr. Jamnik, will that be reflected in the decisions and the findings then?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted to see, that it's reflected in the decision. There's a motion and a second. Any comments? I'll call the question. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, and the motion carries. Congratulations and thank you so much. The next item is item number 6. Item number 6 is an application for Chase Real Estate for a planned unit development amendment for a 4-story mixed-use apartment complex with 172 units, 8,000 of retail, underground, and surface parking located at 50 Travelers Trail East. We're asked to approve the planned unit development agreement and adopt the findings of fact and the ordinance. Ms. Dean, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. This subject agenda item was last heard at the April 10th Planning Commission meeting. There was a dissenting vote. The vote was 2-1, so it's before you tonight. Just an overview for the council to give you some background. The subject site is part of a overall planned unit development that was approved in 2004. It's the last vacant piece of this PUD. We do have a TIF and EDA agreement that's part of this development that will likely be heard later this evening. In 2004, the approval consisted of the Cub Foods retail, townhomes, office and retail condos, and for this site, a mixed-use building of approximately 8,000 to 10,000 square feet of commercial along First Avenue, and 4 stories of condominiums, approximately 129 to 131 units. The site is in close proximity to the future Orange Line station, as well as in close proximity to the Burnsville Transit Station. This would be considered not only transit-oriented development, but it is in our, what we call our core town center area of heart of the city. To give you an overview of the comparison from 2004 to 2017 proposal, it's very similar. In fact, the number of stories, the number of commercial, there is an increase of units of approximately 40 units. However, it's largely the same, or I would say largely similar. Correct me. The site does provide 1 underground space per unit that would be assigned to each individual unit. There is also available surface parking, on-street parking, as well as availability of our Heart of the City ramp available just a block away. The proposal also includes a larger courtyard and pool amenity features outside of the building. And then just for your reference, I included a unit breakdown chart in case you wanted to reference that. This gives you an overall view of the site plan, it is a rendering. I do obviously want to advise you of that, but it gives you an idea of the landscape amenities that would be part of this building, the approximate U shape that is, again, very consistent with that 2004 approval. And I'd like to highlight the outdoor courtyard. Again, it's more robust than that 2004 approval, which is a benefit to the city. The overall first floor I provided, which has the mix of units on the first floor as well as the high amenity concierge, the yoga facilities, lounges for residents. The lounges and exercise facilities are carried over on multiple floors. The first floor does have that commercial component of 8,000 square feet, again, facing the eastern portion of the site, mirroring First Avenue. This gives you an overall view of the proposed architecture. This is what you're looking at up top is the south elevation, and then we have the east elevation and the west elevation. So the west elevation, for example, is what you would be seeing off of Nicollet Avenue, for reference. And then the north elevation, the view you would be seeing from the courtyard area or internally to the site looking south. The garage plaza, which would be the garage plaza entry area, the east elevation, and then the west elevation. And then just a rendering of the corner that you would see and the commercial that abuts First Avenue. Staff and, the Planning Commission did recommend approval of the project again 2-1. The dissenting vote was largely in regards to the architecture of the proposal. However, as recommended by staff, the Planning Commission overall did recommend approval of the project, subject to the conditions that are listed in the staff report. Certainly, if there are any questions of me or the applicant, he is in the audience.
Okay. Questions of staff? My only question is to make sure that everybody understands. In this area, the heart of the city, and in all of the documents, there is a shared parking model. And for everyone to also understand that in the city of Burnsville, you cannot park outside from 2 to 6 unless you ask police and have them recognize that you have a car that's going to be parked outdoors. But in the heart of the city, they can park at our deck
That's correct.
overnight. And it is reflected in the report. So I just want people to understand all of that. And the proof of parking doesn't apply to the heart of the city. Correct? Because we have a shared parking model. The calculations were all done in 2004, but it's a shared parking model.
Correct.
Ms. Faulkner?
Correct, Madam Mayor. The HOC framework plan does allow for, actually, it almost, it certainly encourages shared parking, and also parking on the streets can also be counted on the public streets, even though it's not allowed overnight, can be counted towards the overall parking calculation. So it is expected that there will be shared parking on public and private property.
Yeah. So the other thing that, in just listening to the Planning Commission meetings, and also the project footprint is the same. The height of the building is the same. The only thing that's different is the mix of units. That's a little different. But it's also complying with the one-to-one parking underground for each unit. Correct?
That's correct. It does meet the one-to-one and largely compatible with that 2004 approval.
So the other part that that I hope everybody understands with regard to the number of units, our ordinance requires that we do an EAW, an environmental assessment worksheet. And in 2004, that was done. And that still holds true today. Ms. Faulkner?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, the EAW was done actually prior to 2004. I think
2001.
it was done, exactly.
Because
thank
when
you.
we did the mix of
Correct.
uses and all of that, we realized that we had to do that. And so it was done prior to.
For the whole district in its
That's right.
entirety, correct.
So I want to make sure that everybody understands that. The other part that came up in the Planning Commission, and some folks are, this is a pedestrian-friendly environment, and there was a traffic study done as well back in 2004. Or did we do it prior to? I didn't look closely to the background items to see. Did we do it in 2001 also, or did we do it in 2004, the traffic study?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, the traffic analysis, the traffic study would have certainly been done with the EAW.
Yeah.
I believe there was a condition in the 04 PUD that follow-up analysis be done when this particular Nicollet Plaza PUD is complete. It's not complete yet, so that follow-up piece has not been done. But certainly, traffic was a big part of the analysis of the EAW.
And I remember all of that, so it was very comprehensive, and we did a lot of work that led up to that. So these are the pieces that were issues that were raised at the Planning Commission, and I just wanted to make sure that people understand. It's all reflected in the background, if people had taken the time to read the background and understand that all of that is there. So these are just the points that I wanted to make sure people understood what is going on here. And this will complete this project here. And the first condo retail building went up, and then the recession hit, and Mr. Klingelhut and his partners couldn't get this second building up simply because of the banking regulations and so forth, and they had to hit a higher threshold of absorption, and so they couldn't get it done. But here we are, the economy has turned around, and we have someone who is willing to do something about this site and complete the project. Council, any questions, or?
Good review, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Elwin, do you have anything to add to this? This is the Chase folks. Do you have anything to add? Yes. Yes, Joe. Yes, please do. This is Mr. Joe McElwin, and he is with Chase Real Estate.
Thank you.
And he's the applicant. Yes.
Good evening, council members and mayor. I will be brief because I think the mayor went over everything I really wanted to cover tonight. At last week's Planning Commission, I did review our plans, the elevations, and the news regarding our ongoing relationship with our neighbor, HJ, who was the Nicollet Plaza LLC. We, Chase, along with the seller of the property, KSH, who was part of the original PUD documents, are confident that the plans we have proposed meet the intent of the PUD and are fully compliant also with the private declaration. We have been studying this development, all the agreements, all of the heart of the city requirements since September of last year, in which we put a purchase agreement on the property get together. And at that time, we had reached out to our neighbor HJ. It has been unclear to us over the past couple of months as to why our project is meeting resistance from our neighbor HJ, having a project that is identical in footprint and site plan, high quality architecture, finishes and amenities, and one that will bring great residents to this neighborhood and undoubtedly benefit the grocery store and surrounding businesses. We are providing the additional underground parking required, of which staff supports, and we do have the same reduction to the parking as the entire PUD allowed, the change being quite negligible. And this is not even to take into account, as you mentioned, Mayor, the proximity to several public transit options, the coming Orange Line, the street parking allowed by the heart of the city, the parking ramp, which is 300 feet away, a bus stop that is on our property, and the 900 stalls on Nicollet Plaza as they exist today. And note, the PUD and the heart of the city were guided by a shared parking plan all along. I think it's worth one last comment on regarding parking. because last week my email box was, well, I can't help but say, the most news out in real estate and I guess in city planning is driverless cars. Last week, all my real estate journal, architect lectures, city planning presentations, et cetera, that came across my email feeds, many related to how driverless cars are coming out without a doubt and will have a major, major impact on not just how we get from A to B, but how city planning will completely change. There are 19 car companies working to have a driverless model ready by 2020. I mention this because I think it will be relatively fresh in our memories of all these debates developers have in different jurisdictions regarding parking ratios. I know it's not relevant at the moment, but car ownership rates will have or have already peaked, and I know zoning codes will likely be changing soon enough. So our team is anxious to take the next steps with drawings, the permit process, the branding, the interior design, and so forth, in bringing a great project to the heart of the city. We are looking forward and reaching toward our final city approvals, as our goal is to begin construction this June for a fall 2018 opening. I know that every project seems to have its hurdles and setbacks. I wish the neighboring conflict could have been resolved sooner. Regardless, that is a private matter. We are moving forward confidently with a compliant project and one that the neighborhood and city will enjoy and be proud of. With that, I know that you have seen all the renderings. I can comment or answer any questions.
Well, for one, I want to thank you that I also noticed that you are considering to put a public art piece there.
We will, yes,
Thank you very much,
of course.
because that was one of the big things that we wanted to see more and more of. So thank you very much for that. And secondly, if anybody in that area would look at the beautiful amenities that you're proposing to have on the north side of the building, is going to add great value to that whole area that has a lot of parking. And it's going to add a beautiful visual appeal for anybody that's going to be looking at it. So but you showed it up. Yep, there's, and
Yes.
it's going to have a lot more planting than the building to the west. Oh,
But the
east,
yeah.
to the
Yes,
east.
we will have
to the east.
landscaping around the perimeter of the building
Yeah.
that I think meets
Yeah.
the Minnesota tall grass
Yeah.
character. I would like to mention we did improve the amount of amenities that I think also reach on travelers.
Mm-hmm.
Just so that all the amenities and kind of the idea that this is a public building that, we're not public, but it's a rental building that we can showcase more of those common spaces along travelers.
Yeah. Well, I think that the amenities on the outside of the building will be enjoyed by all of us. I
Yes.
live in the area, and so does Councilmember Keeley, so it's a beautiful addition.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any comments from Mr. McElwain? Okay, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
And I see that Mr. Penwell is in the audience. Would you like to speak, Mr. Penwell? I understand that you signed to speak. Good evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, council members. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I represent Nicollet Plaza. They're often referred to as HJ Development, but the correct name is Nicollet Plaza. There's basically three issues that I want to touch on tonight. The first, which Mr. McElwain referred to, is a private declaration that covers the cross easement agreement between the various parties. My client, as the declarant, has the right and obligation to review the plans and decide whether to grant approval or withhold approval of the plans. And the approval can be withheld if the plans are not substantially in accordance with the plans that were approved back in 2004. It is a private agreement, so it's more of a point of information for the council that Nicollet Plaza has withheld approval for reasons that have been outlined in detail in a letter and that has been sent to Chase. And that it appears that we're headed toward what's called, you probably are familiar with, a declaratory judgment action in court, in which we will be asking a judge to declare the rights and obligations of the parties under this declaration. So, as I say, that's more of a point of information for the council, just so that you understand that piece of it. Second, what I understand is being proposed tonight is an amendment to the PUD agreement. That PUD agreement back in 2004 was signed by 3 parties, Opus, and Nicollet Plaza is the successor to Opus. KSH and Chase is, as I understand it, has the property under contract with KSH, and then, of course, the city. PUD agreements are contracts under the law, and any amendment to the PUD agreement, at least it is Nicollet Plaza's position that any amendment to the PUD agreement requires approval and of all 3 parties that signed that agreement, and then a signature by those 3 parties, including Nicollet Plaza. And unfortunately, Nicollet Plaza is essentially being left out of the PUD amendment and is not going to be given the opportunity or the right that they have by law to sign off on those amendments, discuss them, negotiate them, and come to agreement between the 3 parties to that PUD agreement. So that's the second issue. And then the third issue, I think maybe I'll characterize as just some questions that Nicollet Plaza has about how this process has evolved and why the city is willing to deviate so significantly from the density requirements that are contained in the code, as well as the parking requirements that are contained in the code. And I want to start, I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure how to operate this. Am I able to use this?
It's showing. It's showing.
Yep,
If you look above.
Oh, thank you. This is from the HOC design framework. This section covers a design review committee and talks about a process for the design review process. It has 4 different basic steps that are followed, one of which is a formal review process that is to include a public meeting in front of the city council. It's my client's understanding that the design review committee did not review this and was not, that this particular process was not followed.
Mr. Penwell?
Yes.
You were not brought up to date then. The design review committee was dissolved by the council.
Okay,
So it does not exist anymore.
All right.
Because everything is moving well, and
Okay.
there was no need for a design review committee.
thank you for that clarification. So I'll move on. Back in July of 2004, what was considered and approved was 30 units of townhomes. The property that we're talking about, 131 residential units with about 10,000 square feet of retail, and then 73 residential units with 12,000 square feet of retail. And I note that at that time, parking was an important consideration. At least 1 underground space was required for each unit. And then the townhome development will provide for 2 garage spaces, 2 driveway spaces, and guest parking as required by code. This parking will not be part of the shared parking areas. On-street parking in front of the units on Travelers Trail will be available for additional guest parking, but will not be allowed as overnight parking. So the code requirements were followed at that time, and the parking for the townhomes was not part of the shared parking area, as opposed to what is being proposed for approval by the city council tonight.
Mr. Penwell?
Yes.
I'm not sure if you have reviewed all of the developments in the heart of the city, but the townhomes was also amended, the PUD was amended, so it didn't have the 2-story townhomes, but we helped the developer to have single floor, single-level doubles, villas, rather than the townhome concept. So all of that, what we did do amendments, a lot of amendments to help make the project work, and so that it has vitality in the area, and to meet the economic challenges of the time and what people were looking for. People were looking for one level rather than the 2 or 3 level townhomes that were proposed at the beginning. And we made those amendments. So we're very business friendly, and I'm not sure of you, because instead of the 30 townhome units, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 3 buildings of 3, correct?
19 units total.
19 total,
Between the villas and
Yeah.
the two-story.
yeah.
Well, I think what takes this particular site out of other projects is the fact that, as I said, there was a PUD agreement that was signed by 3 parties. There were also private redevelopment agreements between KSH and the Burnsville EDA, and then Opus and the Burnsville EDA. Both of those private redevelopment agreements cross-referenced each other, and they were all based on an approval. Those agreements were signed on October 1, 2004, and they were based on what the city council did in July of 2004, which was to approve 131 units on this site. And that's what Nicollet Plaza relied on at the time. That's what they went forward with. They've made almost $1 million investment toward the repayment of KSH's TIF note in reliance on a project that was going to be very close to what was approved back in 2004. And I've heard several people say tonight that it's the same size footprint, it's a 4-story building, but it's 40 more units. This project is considerably over the density allowed by the HOC code, and it's significantly underparked, not only compared to 2004, but simply in terms of what the demands of this particular center are. And I guess one of the things that my client is a little bit perplexed about is that prior to the first planning commission meeting, the staff report said what was very much against tandem parking. The comment was that the tandem parking doesn't work. As I understand it from Nicollet Plaza's architect, these tandem parking spaces don't accommodate 2 cars. I heard the comment made somewhere along the way that those tandem parking spaces will be used for 1 car and they'll put storage in the other half of it. And so to say that, and so to have the city council or the staff so adamantly opposed to tandem parking and basically saying it doesn't work, it's not in reality tandem parking, and then to have that issue completely ignored and now say tandem parking is going to work, what's going to happen in reality is that tandem parking won't be used, and the cars that can't park underground are going to have to find some place to park above ground, which is going to contribute even more to the underparked nature of this particular site. Your code says that the parking, for residential parking, as I understand it, all the parking has to be the parking requirements have to be satisfied on the site. That means that no shared parking arrangement can be used for satisfying the code requirement. And I understand, and that goes back to a PUD amendment, which requires my client's approval and signature. So, you know, I'm hearing you say, Mayor, certainly, and it appears that the rest of the council is very much in favor of this. But, you know, Mr. McElwain says he doesn't understand what the reasons for the resistance are. I've sent at least 2 letters, probably 3 letters, outlining exactly what the points of resistance are. They're not made up, they're not arbitrary, they're just trying to pack too much onto this particular site, and it doesn't work. And you have before you, as part of Chase's submissions, there is an aerial of the site, and they show how they use shared parking from the other residential properties that are too remote. I mean, nobody's from the Chase side is going to park over there. What's going to happen is when they can't find parking on the Chase site, they're going to go into the Cub Food parking lot where they're not allowed to park. I mean, that's just the reality of what's going to happen. And so, you know, I don't want to go on and on if there's not, you know, any interest in discussing these issues, but I do want to put these issues before you. The first Planning Commission meeting, there was great concern expressed about the density and about the parking. And as you know, it was tabled at that point so that those issues could be studied more. The second Planning Commission meeting, at least half the Planning Commission members didn't show up. There wasn't any discussion at all of parking or density. The tandem parking was no longer an issue for the staff. And so, you know, this is why my client's scratching his head a little bit and saying, what's going on here? I mean, apparently you want the project, but some very important considerations about density and under parking that were addressed and concerns were expressed are now being ignored and glossed over, and we don't understand why that is.
Thank you, Mr. Penwell. We heard your remarks at the Planning Commission meeting. One of the things that I have to say to you is that, Mr. Penwell, a plan unit development is a flexible tool, and we use it often here in the city of Burnsville. So what we're doing is approving the same project. The only difference is the number of units, same footprint, nothing has changed. It's going to be in an urban setting, has a different requirement than any of the other areas in Burnsville. But we have different areas in Burnsville where we have made other concessions and also made amendments. For instance, when Total Wine came in and we had to work with all of the different parking around that area. So what we do here is about land use and zoning. And you're a land use attorney, then you understand that plan unit developments are flexible tools that's available to us to help make things work. Now, when you talk about parking, and we have a shared parking model, and I was here, so it is my signature on all of the things that you have seen and read. And I was very much involved in all of those agreements and also the development of the heart of the city. So what you bring up saddens me, because what we're looking at is you holding a project hostage and the vision of the city to see completion of that one area. And it saddens me that in our city, where we all work together so that everyone thrives and everyone is successful, now, because of a difference in understanding, and I understand because I've read your letter to Mr. McElwain, it was all in our background, all of your correspondence with him, and also our attorney has also reviewed all of your letters and the conversations that you've had. So I know that we're going to go to a declaratory judgment. You have said that. But the thing is, I think you will find that what we are approving here tonight is land use and zoning and a project that meets all of those standards and qualifications. So we may disagree, we may agree to disagree tonight, Mr. Penwell, and the judge can take a look at that.
I agree we can agree to disagree,
Yes.
and we can have a difference of opinion. I don't particularly appreciate being accused of holding this council hostage. I'm here in good faith on behalf of my client, who I believe has legitimate issues both under the declaration and a PUD agreement, which is a private contract. I believe, as a matter of law, that the PUD, an amendment to the PUD requires my client's signature and approval.
Okay.
We can disagree about that. Mr. Jamnick and I have had communication about that. I respect that. We will find out. I mean, as last resort, my client is not litigious. He does not want to bring a lawsuit, but he believes very strongly that this is, he, as the declarant, he has to protect all of the people involved in the entire site. And he legitimately believes, I mean, hold this council hostage to what end? I don't know. I don't know what you think the hidden agenda is.
The city, because it
The
is
city.
the project for the completion of this project. So,
I
you know, I
understand.
think
I
it's
just
okay.
don't know toward what end is he
I
trying to
don't- I
hold the
don't-
city hostage.
Well, I don't understand either, but I guess we will find out.
That's fine.
Because what then, after the judgment is made, then what? Then what? But the thing is,
Then
I don't
it-
think we need to argue this right here tonight, because a judge will have to do that. And you've had conversations with our attorney. He has an opinion, just like all attorneys that come before us. They all have opinions.
No doubt.
And they all bring their opinions to us. But we have our attorney that we listen to.
Sure.
So, thank you.
Fair enough. Thank you,
Thank
Mayor.
you.
Thank you, council members. I appreciate
Yeah.
your time.
Okay. Members of the council, any thoughts? Or are you ready to make a decision? Councilmember Keely.
Just one comment. I look at things from a business standpoint, and with respect to the private agreement that is, pre-Great Recession, that is pre a lot of things, there is two very obvious and significant benefits to me with having 170 units versus 132. The first most glaring, as a 40-year retail veteran, is 40 more, probably 40 to 80, maybe 90 more customers shopping the
Yeah.
retail center. And I'm sure the tenants of that shopping center would appreciate those additional bodies patronizing their store. And as a shopper of that strip center for many years and now living on the edge of the parking lot of Cub, I've witnessed the majority of that parking lot for 365 days being mostly empty. And unless HJ was going to consider bringing forth another development to use up space that has got grass growing in the cracks, this is putting a shared parking project to work in a shared parking area of the city. No deference with respect to any private agreement. There's a lot of unused space there all the time, every day of the week, every year, every week of the year. And so, from my perspective, I don't understand the objections, but they're legal in basis. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to get into that ring, but I'll just say there is so many benefits to this project coming to this piece of land that I'm shocked that those advantages haven't brought resolve at the table between the two parties. So we're going to move forward.
Yep. So, are we
Would you
ready
like-
to make a motion? Councilmember Coughlin.
Motion to approve the findings of fact and decision approving the PUD
Agreement. And the ordinance.
and the ordinance.
Second?
There's a motion by Councilmember Coughlin, second by Councilmember Keely. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries. Thank you very much. I will now recess the Burnsville City Council meeting so the Economic Development Authority can proceed with its meeting. President Keely.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I now open the Burnsville Economic Development Authority meeting. To call it to order. Note, we have all commissioners present. First item up, additions to the final agenda. Do we have any, commissioners? Seeing none, moving on, we'll go on to the consent agenda. We have approval of minutes from our previous meeting on, no, I can't find the date, April 4th. Any comments? Entertain a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting.
Go, Carol.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Schultz, second by Commissioner Coughlin. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, and same sign. And we move on to the regular agenda. We have one item, resolution approving a partial assignment and assumption of development agreement with KSH Development LLC and Chase Commercial Properties LLC. And we have presenting tonight Skip Nienhuis. Take it away,
Thank you,
Skip.
Mr. President, Commissioners. This EDA item links to the PUD that you just approved. This is the action that the EDA needs to take. There is a development contract that exists between the EDA and KSH. This assignment and assumption agreement will allow the sale of the land, and we'll make some amendments to that agreement. Basically, what we are doing is the current agreement calls for at least 130 owner-occupied units. The amendment will read to up to at least 150 rental units. The 8,000 square feet of retail space remains intact. The commencement of construction date is moved from December of last year until September of this year. The construction completion date remains in effect as December 31st of 2008. And the agreement also recognizes that the EDA will continue to make TIF payments to KSH Development, but also recognizes that KSH and Chase can enter into a private agreement in which Chase could receive some portion of those TIF from KSH. With that, Mr. President, staff recommends that the EDA approve the agreement. The agreement also did go before the EDC at their March meeting, and the EDC Commission also recommended that the EDA approve the agreement. And staff would stand for any questions the commission has, or the authority has.
Thank you, Mr. Nienhaus. Commissioners, any questions or comments related to this project? It's been a long road. We've had this in front of us a few times for the council, of course, Planning Commission. I think we're all very familiar with all the details. And so without any further comments or questions from Mr. Nienhaus, I'll open the floor to a motion.
Move to approve.
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Gustafson, second by Commissioner Schultz. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Same sign. Thank you, Mr. Nienhaus. The motion passes. We have nothing else on our agenda, and a motion to,
Dan.
sorry?
I'd like to say something.
Yes? Comments from Commissioner
I'm,
Gustafson?
this is a kind of a important night for me. This has been something I've been working on, as most of you know, for 8 years, and we're finally come to this, and I'm happy to know that very soon we're gonna start seeing cranes in Burnsville again, and it's the first of many, what I hope to be many projects for our economic development.
Thank you, Commissioner Gustafson. Well said, and I would second that feeling. This is it's a very special opportunity to be able to approve the CDA project, approve it on the council as we did in our city council role. This is going to bring a lot of good economic development to the heart of the city, and likely going to spur some additional development, and we can finish what is turning out to be certainly a historical milestone in the history of Burnsville, as one of the greatest redevelopment projects that we've had. And looking forward to the groundbreaking and the crane swinging, as Commissioner Gustafson. Commissioner Couts, some comments?
Just to say that the first building in the heart of the city opened in 2004. That was Grand Market Place and Grand Market Square. And we also dedicated the park, Nicollet Commons Park. And then in 2000, we also had, in 2004, the Nicollet Plaza area. So what people are experiencing now is an urban setting in a suburban environment that is pedestrian-friendly. And we have gone through a great deal of challenges. One was the Great Recession, and the banks closing down on all of the loans. Now things are flowing again. The economy is great, and we're moving forward. And I think this is something that we will see a lot of great economic vitality. But one of the things that will happen in the heart of the city is that all of the people who are going to be living there will create a vibrancy in that area. It will never roll up its streets like at one time St. Paul did, because people live there, and there will be people working there during the day as well. So all of those visions for that area is becoming a reality. And it's going to be lots of fun and exciting to see all of that. So I'm glad that things went well, but we have one more hurdle to go through, and that's the declaratory judgment, and then hopefully that they can break ground in June. We'll see.
Thank you, Commissioner Couts. Any other comments? With that, a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Commissioner Coughlin, seconded by
Second.
Commissioner Couts. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And we adjourn the regular meeting of the Burnsville Economic Development Authority, and I turn it back over to you, Madam Mayor, for Burnsville City Council.
Thank you. I will now reconvene the Burnsville City Council meeting, and there are no other items to come before us this evening, and the motion to adjourn is in order.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Councilmember
Paradigms go
Coughlin makes the motion, second by Councilmember Gustafson. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, and the motion carries. Good night, and thank you for being with us.